Everyone, hello, and thank you for joining us for our last part of our five-part series about the 100 artifacts that we have been featuring in our 100 Artifacts for 100 Years Centennial exhibit related to the museum. The exhibit is currently on view at the museum through the end of this month, February 2026. And as Jack was just saying earlier, it's hard to believe that our 100th anniversary year went by so quick. Thank you very much for everybody who has been viewing these videos, for your support, whether you are watching us live or you're checking us out after we've aired on our YouTube channel. I'm Heather Garside. I am the museum's curator, and here with me is the museum's director, Giacomo DeStefano. And today we're going to focus on the stories related to artifacts 81 to 100. While the museum's collection today is concentrated on historic artifacts, at one time we had a very impressive natural history collection, and we shared some of the items related to that collection in previous videos in this series. But now we're going to share a few more natural history items with you. And here we see number 81 is our internationally known Paterson pearls. The Paterson Museum has a collection of 5 Paterson pearls, which probably should actually be known as Clifton pearls, as they were found in the Notch Brook, which is in modern-day Clifton, our neighboring city. Here you see an artist's impression of the area surrounding the Notch Brook where they were found. The specimens were collected during the Great Pearl Rush of 1857. And there's a video on our YouTube channel where I go into detail on the history behind this rush, so I'm only going to kind of touch on the highlights here today. The rush began because a Paterson shoemaker named David Howell went fishing for river mussels like this one. When he came home and he cooked them, he found a cooked pearl inside one of them. Now, the pearl he cooked had lost all value, but he shared his find with his neighbors, and everyone got really excited, and they all started looking for their own pearls in the river. And news spread, and soon thousands of people came to Paterson, to the Notch Brook, looking for these pearls. There are many accounts and descriptions of pearls found during the rush, but I've never found a definitive count of exactly how many were recovered. Quite a few, I think, because unfortunately one of the results of this is that the river mussels died out in the river, in the brook. But in the end, the Paterson pearls were not very well received by the market, and jewelry makers weren't able to sell them. And so their supposed value did not live up to the expectations of those people who rushed here to make their fortune. The pearls that we have in our collection, these 5, were purchased by J.P. Morgan. And during his lifetime, Morgan gave them to the American Museum of Natural History in New York. The museum removed them from their permanent collections in the 1970s, and eventually, after going through a couple of brokers, they made their way back to New Jersey, coming to us in 2004. And we have them now on permanent display, and I think they're well worth a visit. And as you can see, they're very interesting because some of them are, they're less than perfect, right, Jack? In their
Yeah, they're irregular shapes, but that's what makes them beautiful and unique.
Yeah, definitely.
Prehnite, I'm up. This is probably one of the most common minerals that Paterson's really known for, talking about, putting us on the map. Minerals have been studied here since 1822, and over 48 minerals have been found in the basalt of this area. Our minerals and the specimens, that we possess are the oldest objects that we have, dating at least about 200 million years ago, and it goes back to the breakup of the supercontinent of Pangaea. As the continents were separating, the rifts that were open, allowed lava to flow, or magma, which came up to the surface. It was quite swampy, and water gets involved. And as the rapid cooling of the lava forms these cavities, minerals are formed, crystallizations, and some of them clump together like we have here. Our prehnite's pretty unique because it's really well known because it looks more like grape. It's grape-like. You can see the next slide. And spears, which are, highly collectible. And most of these were all, of course, found because it was part of the trap rock. That's the industrial term for quarrying rock. The basalt is igneous rock that formed in fire, and it was really good for the early road beds for railroads. Later, it would be an aggregate for concrete. So there were quite a few quarries that were right along what would be the first Watchung mountain range, where Garrett Mountain is part of it, and it overlooks the city of Paterson. But again, what Paterson's really known for of the 48 identified minerals, prehnite is one of the most sought after.
And here we've included not one, but two minerals on our list. Cavinsite is our second mineral we're going to talk about today. But unlike prehnite, cavinsite is not found in Paterson or New Jersey. So you might be asking, why the heck did we include it? Well, there are two reasons, really. The first reason is to allow us to highlight our extensive mineral collection, which includes fabulous specimens from all over the world. The curators of the Paterson Museum from 1925 up until the 1980s were all mineralogists. And their big focus for the museum for its first 50 years or so were creating a spectacular collection of minerals from all over the world. And we actually, our nickname originally was the Rock Museum. If you talk to a lot of people, they remember us as the Rock Museum. Today, when you visit the museum, you will see some of our best and most interesting international specimens, of which this cavinsite is among them. Now, cavinsite was first discovered in 1967, and it can be found in many places around the world, but it is commonly found in Pune, India. And that is significant. And our second reason for including it is because Pune is Paterson's geological sister city. Like Paterson, this region of India has a lot of basalt, and many of the same minerals that are found in Paterson also formed and are found in Pune. One of the exceptions to this is cavinsite, which is only found in Pune, and as far as we know, to this day, has not yet been found in Paterson. Another interesting fact about the relationship between the minerals of Pune and Paterson, which I think is really cool, is that Paterson's minerals are older, having formed 100 million years before those found in Pune.
Our 1821 gooseneck. This is the oldest firefighting apparatus that we have in our collections, and I believe in the state. The Paterson Fire Department was actually founded as a volunteer corps in July 4th, 1815. Somewhere prior to 1820, they did have an apparatus which they considered a cumbersome affair to work. So they looked for a more efficient type of firefighting engine. And that's where the gooseneck came in. It was made by Sayre and Force in New York in 1821, and it was purchased by the Passaic Company Number One, appropriately named after the Passaic River for our first fire company. They purchased her in 1822 for about $850, which today would be equivalent to about 20,000. It's an 8-man. It has side brakes. That's the bars you see on either side. And it takes at least 8 firemen to pump up and down. But in theory, you really need about 24 to like 30 people, as you can only go up and down, generating the power to propel the water out, for just a few minutes. It worked from 1822 until 1835 when she was retired, and then later sold to the Boot and Iron Company. In the early 1880s, the firemen bought her back, and it was brought to the exempt firemen's home. Next slide. The exempt firemen's home kept her proudly on their porch, and they took care of her for a number of years until 1948, when Paterson was going to host the one of the statewide parades. Next slide. This is they were looking originally to do museum quality restoration when the fire chief said no, the fire department could handle it on their own. I think they just couldn't wait to get their hands on it and restore it. And anytime, of course, you drive by a modern day fire department, if if they're not engaged in their primary duty of saving lives and putting out fires, they're always taking care of their equipment. So this was just a labor of love, and they did an amazing restoration in 1948 for the parade. After that, it did not go back to the Exempt Firemen's Association, especially out on their front porch, but it would go through about 3 or 4 different firehouses. As one would close down, they would move it to another one. And then they coupled it with the 1864 Jeffers steamer, which was the first steam fire engine, which is also in our collections. Uh, Throughout the years, next one, it would be used for a series of parades before it was finally relocated to the Paterson Museum. It was actually featured in our first exhibition, my first curator exhibition, I should say, in 1983, called Learn Not to Burn. We had other apparatuses that were brought in from other communities, but these two stayed with us, especially the 1821 gooseneck. Oh, I'm up again. Colt Paterson. Talk about some of the most sought after firearms for collectors. This is like getting the Hope Diamond. And they don't cost as much, but in terms of collecting, they sure do. Sam Colt's first manufacturing of firearms took place in Paterson between 1837 and 1842. The model that we're showing here is a holster model, or a model number 5. It was also later dubbed the Texas model. I'll tell you that in a second. And all the firearms that were manufactured in Paterson are sold as case sets. You need all the accessories to make them operational. Next slide. And this is what it wasn't called the Colt Firearms, but it was the Patent Arms Manufacturing Company. There were investors involved, and it was Colt's patent that was engraved on top of every barrel. Unfortunately for Mr. Colt, though, it was relatively peacetime, not only in the United States, but worldwide. So he did have some difficulties trying to sell his firearms, but he did actively promote them. Next slide. He would give them out to heads of states, and his factory was well known. This is a sketch about 1837 from Thomas Whitley, who came by and did sketches and paintings. Newspapers were well advertising patent arms from coast to coast, but again, it was an expensive firearm, and it was sort of, that it was a little complicated, so it was difficult to get military contracts. Next one. Where they really get on the map, we always talk about, the gun that won the West, and that would be the famous 6-shooter. Paterson period, these are all 5 shots. They're all single action that you would pull the hammer back, and then that would drop the trigger. As you see in the illustration, there's no trigger, they're folding triggers. But where they really got their just due, in about 1838-39, the Texas Navy had ordered 160 of these firearms. And just before they actually, switched over and became the Texas Rangers. And it was Captain Jack Hayes that, acquired these for 15 of his Rangers, and they each had 2. And this is important because where they became famous was at the Battle of Walker's Creek. Now, this is 1844. This is actually 2 years after the factory closed down, but they still had these Paterson pieces with them. And they were really using them against the battles they were having with the Comanches. And one particular battle was the one at, as I said, Walker's Creek. Of the 15 Rangers, they encountered 80 Comanches, 75 to 80 Comanches. And at the end of this battle, or skirmish, more than a battle, 1 Ranger was killed and 4 were injured, whereas 23 Comanches were killed and 30 were wounded. This, success in this little outpost was really made possible by the promotion of Captain Jack Hayes, saying that without the Colt Paterson, they would have never been successful. One of the men that did get injured was Captain Walker. Walker would later be influential in helping resurrect the factory in 1847 when we had the Mexican-American War. At that time, Sam Colt had already returned back to Hartford, Connecticut. And when the Army was looking for a firearm, Walker, who had been part of the Hayes party, put some improvements, sending them over to Colt, and Colt manufactured them. And his very first successful would be the official gun of the Republic of Texas, would be the Walker Texas model. As I said, patent arms. I should always look. There's one more slide to go. Total production for Paterson pistols would be about 2,850 and about 2,000 long arms or rifles. Rifles were what they were really trying to secure for their military contracts. Unfortunately, again, he was not successful. And many of these firearms have been lost to history. Today, there's anywhere from 3 to maybe up to 500 pieces. Really hard to know, although more and more are ending up in the public domain, such as the Paterson Museum, which has the second largest collection on the East Coast. This is another shot of the factory. This factory is doubly important because it's also the beginning of the silk industry. The gentleman standing in the white suit on the upper right, if you see some of the earlier history books, they always identified him as Sam Colt. And I have to say, I think this is my first part, my only brilliance looking at the Colts, was I was pretty sure that wasn't Sam Colt, not just based on his stature, but you notice on the attic, actually you notice in both images, when you see the roof line, you'll notice the skylights. Well, the skylights weren't cut into 1846. Again, in that upper floor there is where Christopher Colt, his younger brother, would have brought the very first silk machinery. And it's also the beginnings of our silk industry. And secondly, which really confirmed this, is the image is in an engraving form, standing in front of the mill on John Ryle's paperhead. John Ryle is the one who's the father of the silk industry in the United States, and I'm pretty sure that's him in front of his mill. I doubt very much Sam would have came back 4 years later. Yet he wasn't manufacturing firearms at this period to come back to take a picture at a failed venue in the collection as is today. We have 31 of 33 firearms on display. One is out on loan. We have interesting serial number one, which is a 7.5 inch barrel, and a serial number three. I don't know where number two is. If we could get that, that would really be the trifecta for our collecting. But number three is out at the NRA Museum. So this is one of again, the finest collections you'll see on the East Coast. It's probably about the third largest that I know of.
All right, I'm up again. This item is all relatively new acquisition for the museum. It's a baseball bat bag, and it's from St. John's Parochial School, which was associated with St. John the Baptist Cathedral on Grand Street. We selected this artifact because, like the wooden slide that we presented a couple of presentations before in an earlier program, these are some of the few artifacts we have that are sort of related to childhood and play at our museum. So much of our collecting has been focused on Paterson's industries. We sort of have omitted the sort of living in Paterson as a kid aspect. So we've got the bag relatively recently, and we don't have a lot of detail about the bag or the club. I believe from my research that the club was either under 16s or under 12s, or it might have had two sections under the same name. I was able to find some references to the team in Paterson newspapers. The earliest reference was 1908, and the latest reference I found was 1919. And so I've shared with you a couple of the clippings that I have, which are pretty much just scores or indicating that they were going to be playing another team. They seem to have mostly played other teams associated with religious institutions. I'm assuming other parochial school teams. And from what I could read, they seem to have been pretty good. They won quite a few of their games, and some of the articles were talking about how they were particularly impressive amateur players. So more to be found out about them, I think. So this artifact is the first of three that we selected to represent some of the high schools here in Paterson. And I'm just going to take a minute before we go any further to indicate that the order in which we're presenting them in no way demonstrates preference to one high school or the other, which I feel necessary to say as the high school rivalries in Paterson are still alive and well. So we are starting with Kennedy here. This piece is actually from John F. Kennedy High School, which is the newest of the three high schools we're going to be speaking about. In 1966, the newly built Kennedy High School replaced Central High School. When the transition occurred, Kennedy picked up the longstanding hometown rivalry that existed between Central High School and Eastside. And that rivalry is still played out in many ways today, but most notably still in the annual Thanksgiving football game, which now is being played back at Hinchliffe Stadium. And the cheerleading legacy at Kennedy continues today as well. Here are some recent photos of Kennedy cheerleaders, and the image on the right is cheerleaders, the cheerleading team in the newly renovated Hinchliffe Stadium, where they now get a chance to enjoy again.
Again, going for school spirit, Eastside High Schools from 1926 when it started. And we chose the, Eastside High School megaphone. One thing you should know about these, they didn't come this way. You can see the E is hand painted as well as the orange. So every high school would have made them their own. And those are, of course, the school colors, the orange and blue. Eastside is close to my heart, not because I attended, but my parents attended back in the late 50s. And the same era of this megaphone. Originally, they were called speaking trumpets, bullhorn, blowhorn, you name it, but we recognize it. Really, as you know what they're for, is to amplify the voice, in a given direction before they had the electronic ones. Eastside High School, as I mentioned, was built in 1926. And, their school spirit, and talking about spirits, is their mascot is the ghost, since they're built on the former Sandy Hill Cemetery property along Market Street. And We really tried. You would think with all the photos in our collection, which again is over a couple 100,000 in tracing newspapers, we could not find a cheerleader using a megaphone. So if anyone out there knows someone, we would love to incorporate that. Especially we're looking at the shots of the football games. It's like we know they were there because that's really, I think, where the megaphone really became just in general important because the cheering crowds would be so loud that, the only way you could really capture their attention and get your cheers in right was through the megaphone.
And speaking of football games, here we are. And this arguably, if we were going to be going in chronological order for the high schools, should have been the first artifact we talked about, but that's not the way we gave the numbers to the artifacts in this collection. This is our Central High School football. Central High School was actually originally known as Paterson High School and was the first high school in the city. It was built in 1909, and it only changed its name to Central after Eastside was opened, which, as Jack said, was in the late 1920s. This football once belonged to Bernie Laporta, who you may remember from our last presentation was a member of the Happenings, but also when he was in high school before he joined the Happenings, he played football for Central, and that's why he was given this ball. This game ball is from a game which was played on October 3rd, 1959. And it turns out when I found it in the newspaper, it was actually a pretty significant game. So the game was significant to both teams involved because it was the Colts won, and it broke a huge losing streak that they were having in that season. But at the same time, while they were breaking their losing streak, they actually disrupted a huge and significant winning streak for East Rutherford. So half of the papers were just excited that someone had finally beat East Rutherford when they were talking about the game. And it was really interesting to see that it was such a cool game in that sense and important at the time.
Okay, this jersey is actually a replica jersey from the 1920 World Champion Cleveland Indians. Their left fielder was none other than Pattersonian Charlie Jameson. Charlie Jameson was born in 1893, and he grew up on 12th Avenue around East 18th and Graham Ave, just about the same neighborhood that Larry Doby, our other baseball player, who also played outfield for the Cleveland Indians, grew up in. Charlie was actually the one of 9 children, and his father also played semi-pro, so he had the genes to be an athlete. He attended school 6, but by the age of 15, I'm not sure if he completed high school, but he's already playing for the Paterson Lafayettes, which was a semi-pro team. And they had him actually used as a pitcher. He was pretty tough to hit left-hander. He starts his professional career in 1911 with the Buffalo Bisons of the International League for about $250 a month. So everybody did have day jobs on the off season. By 1914, they had realized that he could hit. He could get on base. Wasn't a home run hitter, but he was pretty successful at getting on base. So they bounced him, but that's how he ended up in the outfield and gave up pitching. It wasn't until 1915 that he would actually see his very first major league game and go into a professional stadium when his contract was bought by the Washington Senators. He would play a total of 18 years in baseball, and 14 of them would be with the Cleveland Indians. Next one. This is when 1920 is their big year. It was actually also his big come out year. Prior to that, they just didn't play him enough. Once he started becoming a regular player, his batting average would go into the 370s at one point, especially 1923 and 24. That was his biggest years. But his most important year was really 1920, because that's the year that the Cleveland Indians are going to win the World Series. On August 16th, 1920, they had Jameson Day at the Polo Grounds, and this is where the New York Yankees were playing. The Yankees didn't have their stadium built until, I think, 1923, or the old Yankee Stadium. At that day, they had over 2,000 people from Paterson showed up, and Mayor Frank Van Noort presented him with a diamond ring, a traveling bag, and a few other pieces. Actually, it looked like the fire department was one of the main contributors, because in the off season, he would play under an alias, but everyone knew who he was. He would play on their team, and any monies that he would donate to the Widows Fund. Unfortunately, his event was kind of overshadowed by tragedy. Also on August 16th, Ray Chapman, who played for the Indians, was he was beamed. He got hit by a ball, and he would pass the next day. So it was really tough on the team. Yet you were celebrating, our great Pattersonian, only, to see one of their other players injured. So that was pretty tough for him. But as I said, they did win the World Series, and during the World Series, they beat the Brooklyn Robins, which would become later the Brooklyn Dodgers. He actually batted 333 in the series. He was pretty on fire. He had 5 for 15 hits, and his lifetime over the 18 careers was a 303. So he was, a 300 hitter. And again, most of those were with the Cleveland Indians. Again, not a slugger. His career high is 18 home runs. That's it for, rather, is not career high, his entire playing career. After baseball, they try to offer him to go to the Toledo Mud Hens to become a, manager. And he said he'd rather be a bench warmer than, go to the minor leagues and manage a team. So from 19, he was, released in 32. So from 1933 for about until he was 49, another 19 or so years, he played, semi-pro ball just to keep active. After that, he came back to Paterson, and he worked actually as a security guard. I know I'm using that word actually. You're counting them, aren't you? Heather, 19 years as a security guard at Curtis Wright. And at the end of his career, he would be like some of the children's favorite because he was also a part-time crossing guard. So he was involved in Paterson his entire life. And the 1920 winning team. This is important because we always joke around that the only time the Cleveland Indians are going to win a World Series is if they have an outfielder from Paterson. They've won the World Series twice. 1920, Charlie Jameson. 1948, Larry Doby. They have not won one since.
All right. So at first glance, these two items may seem like they're pretty insignificant. However, they're a perfect example of where something that looks pretty ordinary and unimportant at first glance can be much more significant than a flashy artifact. And what makes these two items significant and why we selected them for the exhibit is that they have a stamp on their bottom. Both of these artifacts were used at Paterson General Hospital, one of 3 hospitals that was located in Paterson during its height. Founded in 1871 as the Hospital of the Ladies Association, it was renamed Paterson General Hospital in 1887. In 1892, a new building, which you can see in the top right, was opened on Madison Avenue. The new facility had 100 beds and 8 private rooms. The Johnson Memorial Wing, which is in the bottom left, was opened in 1926, presenting a whole new face to Madison Avenue. Both of these buildings were later demolished, and the facility was rebranded and the Greater Paterson General when it was relocated to Wayne in the 1970s. And here is a view of the bottom of the teapot, which, as I said, kind of is the thing that elevates them from bric-a-brac to a piece of Paterson history. Here, right underneath the manufacturer's information, which is International Silver Company, and the patent information, we can clearly see stamped Paterson General Hospital.
Cash register. This is an NCR National Cash Register sold in Paterson. They had a branch here. It's the Empire style, which was designed by Tiffany and Company. That's the ornate design that you'll see the filigree throughout the front and the back. Of course, this is the fancy side that only the operator would see. The Series 500 was manufactured in 1909. If we pull out the bottom drawer, it'll actually say it was made for Edmund Pellet, and the dates are inside, so we know it's for the Paterson firm. Edmund Pellet and his brother Gordon would own 3 pharmacies in Paterson. The image here is from about 1925. This is Pellet Brothers. They were on 159 Main Street. Edmund Pellet operated his, an individual one that he was always there at 485, and his brother Gordon was at 485 Broadway, I'm sorry, and Gordon was 107 Park Ave. And the brothers, jointly own these. His brother Gordon must have been the brains, I always think, because he was the president, and Edmund's always listed as the treasurer. We got this from Frank Pinchek was the one who discovered the cash register. Frank had just created the exhibit Patent Medicines of the 1920s. This was an exhibit that was supposed to only be up for six months, 3 to 6 months. It's been here for over 20 years now. The exhibit is still on, and if you want to learn more about Frank and his amazing career, you can check out a separate YouTube video that we did on Frank's career. He located it from the people who had originally bought the pharmacy after Edmund Pellet had passed in 1952. And they had kept it in the basement, really. They didn't ever use it. Next slide. And this was after we cleaned it off initially. You may not have noticed it, but in the very first slide, it had a topper on it that had EB Pellet on it for Edmund Pellet. That they didn't have because when the family sold the business, they had taken the topper off because for as a personal memento. And after we cleaned it up, and this was purchased by the Passaic County Pharmacists Association, we had a special event to accept it. Next slide. And the head of the association was there. That's Ralph Cifaldi on the left of the image, and a couple others from the from the group. While we were doing the unveiling, a gentleman came in with a paper bag, and he was sitting in the audience the whole time. And just as we were about to wrap up, he said, "I have something that'll add that." And he had the topper in his hand, and he presented it to us. And they were able to complete the cash register as it originally was from 1909 through the 1950s. And I have to say, sometimes in the museums, we don't move too quickly. We had the base made, and I had to order the Plexi Cube. And I was dragging my feet on it. I had the dimensions. Thank God we did not order the Plexi Cube, because if we would have got the Plexi Cube that I had originally spec'd out, the topper would have not fit. So we were able to get it so it fit. Again, sometimes waiting actually works out in your favor.
Procrastination. The word you're looking for is procrastination.
Yeah, I think everyone knows what the word is. They're just trying to make it sound better than what it is.
So this artifact is another one of my favorites, and I feel like all of my favorites are really, really dorky sort of throwaway artifacts, but that's kind of what I love about them, is that somebody saved them. So this is a styrofoam hat that's molded to look like a straw skimmer, and it was worn at the 26th annual Great Falls Festival in 1997. For context, that would have been Mayor Marty Barnes' first year in office. And the entertainment for the festival included Daredevil, Brian Miser, the Human Cannonball. To my knowledge, this hat is the only three-dimensional artifact that the museum has related to the Great Falls Festival, which I think is what makes it special as well. The first Great Falls Festival took place September 1st through 5th, 1971, and was held at the Valley of the Rocks to commemorate the ongoing efforts to transform the falls into a historic district. Following the event's success, the Great Falls Festival became an annual event. The early Falls festivals usually centered around an acrobatic feat of some kind. The most famous of these is the festival in 1974, which featured Philippe Petit tightrope walking across the Passaic River. Now, the festival took place only a month after he had been arrested for tightrope walking between the Twin Towers at the World Trade Center. And the legacy of Mayor Kramer and the Falls Festival continues today. The Falls Festival still takes place in Overlook Park and the surrounding area every Labor Day weekend.
And that park, as we know, is the Paterson Great Falls National Historical Park. Once the national park started establishing its physical presence here, they didn't have a welcome center. Actually, we still don't have a welcome center, but that's another story. So, but there's one in the plans. Anyway, when they first came here, they gave us one of their passport stamps. And I got to be honest, I didn't know what this was originally. And I think it's a brilliant marketing idea from Eastern National that populates all the items that you would purchase in a gift shop. And they came up with a passport program that you would bring your passport and go from national park to national park. And you know how we like to collect things and brag that we've been here, there, and everywhere. So you can get a national park booklet, and every park you go to will have a stamp similar, and you can get your official national park to prove you were here. We had one person come in, they had 3 books sandwiched together, and they had been to all but about 3 or 4. We just have over 400 national parks, and one of them it was so remote they went by helicopter to get to. including the Paterson Museum's site. I have to say, though, sometimes these are very interesting people. No offense to anyone, and this is going good. You'll like this. Again, everyone knew we had the passport. We had one gentleman drove 2 hours to come get the passport, and it was 9 o'clock in the morning. I was just walking in, and he walked in right on my heels, and he wanted the passport. I said, "Yeah, we have it here. Set it up." And I said, "You want me to give me a couple minutes? I'll turn the lights on." He's like, "No, no, no. I'm going to come here. I want my stamp. I'll go see the falls." And I go, "But don't you want to see what happened and what developed out of it?" He's like, "No, no, no. I just really need the passport. I need to see the falls." And that was it. I was like, "Wow, they are that dedicated to getting that stamp and accurate." We always keep plenty of pieces of paper to make sure the stamp's perfect. Because more than once, if it didn't stamp 100%, you don't want to be the person at the receiving end of that argument.
So I have a long-standing relationship with this tea set. It was given to the Paterson Museum or the Paterson Library prior to 1935. And in June of 1935, the set was put on loan to the Passaic County Historical Society. And that's where I first encountered it when I was the director curator there for that organization. It was put on display by the Historical Society in Lambert Castle, and it was on display there for several years. But then it was returned to the Paterson Museum in 2024. And today, a couple of the pieces from this set are now featured in the Great Falls exhibit here at the museum. Outside of its life with these historical institutions, we actually don't know very much about the set, which I should say, according to our records, was never a complete set. It was always just sort of some plates, some cups. We never had a full set. The pieces have no maker's marks or hallmarks of any kind, which makes tracing them much more difficult than ceramics usually are to research. And it's adding to the difficulty of dating them. One of the more interesting features that are displayed on all of the pieces are these two images of the falls, which you see here. And the one on the bottom, the lower image of the bridge, most resembles the fourth bridge over the falls. So that kind of gives a little clue because that was erected in 1868. So we know that the set probably dates after that at some point. The images were applied with a lithographic decals, which is a technology that was developed in the 1870s, but not widely used in the United States until 1900. So I think they're probably an early 1900s set, and it's most likely that they were a pretty localized short run. But if anybody's ever seen another set like this, I would love to know, and would help maybe with the research and figuring out more about it. But I still, even though we know very little about it, is one of the pieces that in our collection that I love the most.
Save Your Child poster. Patterson has many firsts, and this one's more of the unique first. This, according to the Smithsonian, is recognized as the national campaign as the very first safety poster to secure medicines from children, so they don't accidentally ingest too many aspirin or anything. Next slide. This came at the idea of Frank Pinchek, who was in 1954 promoted to being the president of the Passaic County Pharmacists Association. Shortly afterwards, he had read two articles in the Paterson Morning Call and Evening News about, two children dying. One, the oil of wintergreen. It was in a bottle. That was from Leonia. Actually, a child had an old the father had recycled a Coca-Cola bottle, he thought, and put the wintergreen in. Child thought it was, a soda pop, drank it and passed. And then about a month later, a young girl had eaten a whole bottle of aspirins and passed at the General Hospital. And Frank thought, we have to do something. This is really avoidable, but people have to learn how to secure their medicines. And then what happened is he came up with this idea, and he talked to a friend of his who was an artist in Ridgewood, and he would draw out these concepts. And that's where the first poster came from. And this campaign went coast to coast, the Save Your Child, in a few different variations. Again, where you see the Passaic County Pharmaceutical Association. And this was the beginning of Frank to creating a whole poster campaign that he would start around 64, well, actually, no, 58 to 1968. So it was about a 10-year run as the professional advancement plan. Next one. Again, this is his, the recognition by the Smithsonian after their careful research. And the very first posters that he would work out later, the first one was opium, showing, the medicinal purposes, what's legal, what's illegal. And really, this was a whole series and beautiful artwork. I mean, they're really vibrant. Again, this is 1958. If you remember, I certainly remember some of these, and I'm not that old. Maybe they kept them around longer than they should have. But if you recall seeing in the windows, the store dressings normally would have two or three windows of medical information. And and Frank, came out with this plan, and they were like $50 each. You'd get four a year. You'd have the one, center panel, and then the two side panels. And this was the best way to get information out. And again, and they're also artistic. So we have a whole series coming up here, just to give you an idea of the poster exhibit that are in our collections. He used these again, and it wasn't just about medicine. You see mental illness, fluoride, and putting in water, immunity, which is a big one. Again, it's hard to believe that we how things have gone back somewhat on how you have to explain the importance of vaccinations and all. And also, not only did he want these to go in the store windows, but after, the next one would come quarterly, he recommended you taking the old ones and don't discard them. Send them to like, the local community center, maybe the church banquet hall or so. So you would keep this information. And it was really the best way before the internet to, get the latest information about, the values of medicine, taking care of yourself, but most importantly, keeping medicine secure.
You're all set.
Oh, I'm up again.
Yep.
This trophy has gotten quite the traveling piece. This was presented to Lou Costello by the city of Paterson on August 24th, 1942. Bud and Lou came up with this idea in 42 to raise money for World War II effort for the war bond drive. And what they had offered to do is they would go to any community that would pledge $1 million. And Paterson was one of the last, not that we were the last, but one of the last stops, as they had started in California and were working their way across the country. This was presented to Lou at Bowerly Field at Eastside High School. And I have to say, this was an important piece to him. Of the many accolades and trophies that he'd received, I've actually seen a photo of his game where his pool table, and up on the mantle, this trophy meant something to him. And so it was part of the family for a number of years, and then it kind of got lost in time. And this is how we got this piece. I'd received a call. Now we're very good friends with the current lieutenant of the police department, Louis Spagnola, who had received a telephone call by a former Captain Ragucci, who was retired in Florida. He was retired, and while he was, he had a bumper sticker on his car that Patterson has everything. And this couple approached him and wanted to know a little bit more about his connection with Paterson. This is the Parrish family, and they related the story of this trophy that they found. They were originally from Wisconsin, and Mrs. Parrish had a sister who was in California who was renting out an apartment that had a garage attached to it. And the garage was an old trophy, the trophy that Lou's holding right there, and it was, over covered with paint, and it had paintbrushes stuck in it. So she took a look at it, scratched it off, saw to Lou Costello, and her sister and brother-in-law, they owned a trophy shop. So she in Wisconsin. So she sent the trophy out to them. They cleaned it up. They sent it to the Bronze Shoe Company. Remember the who you used to get bronze shoes of our children, not my era, but a little earlier, bronze and baby shoes. Anyway, they also did silver plating. So they cleaned it up, and then for the next 20 years or so, it would be in their store window. Then they retired. They packaged it up, brought it to Florida, and they put it in a garage. And when they were going over things, I thought, look at this poor trophy. It's back in the garage. It started in a garage. We got to figure a way. Maybe somebody in Patterson, maybe we'll get out to California, and that's how they found us. Anyway, I got the story. Mrs. Parrish called me. I said we would love it. And then I don't hear anything for a couple of months. Just around Christmas, we get this giant box. I open it up. It's just full of popcorns. There's no letter or anything else in it. When I'm digging out, I grab these handles and I pull it up, and it's like, oh my! I thought it was going to be like this little trophy. I had no idea it was like this magnificent silver plated piece. And then to try and reach her to thank her, Again, there was no, I had no number or anything. I had a retracer through UPS that was able to get me contact information. And so again, this piece went from Paterson, California, Wisconsin, Florida, back to Paterson, where it's on permanent view. Again, Lou receiving it.
All right. And Lou Costello is such a big deal, and we have some really interesting artifacts related to him. So we had a hard time picking. So here's our third artifact related to Lou in this 100 artifact lineup. This is the Lou Costello life mask. It was used by Hollywood cosmetic artists to create prosthetics for movies without Lou's physically needing to be present for his sorry, for his face to be fitted. And this is particularly helpful if the prosthetic was damaged during filming, because they could just call up the makeup artist. They could make a new one without Lou having to leave the set to have a new one created. The mask was given to Lou's daughter, Chris, by the makeup artist, and then she in turn gifted it to the museum. And as I said, we're very grateful to have such a unique item related to Lou Costello. Now, many people who are based in Paterson and familiar with the work of Gaetano Federici often come and see our mask and confuse it with the bust that was made by Federici of Costello. And they are similar. The bust by Federici includes the back of the head as well as a bit more neck and shoulders, and that's the kind of key differences, which is why ours is referred to as a mask rather than a bust. But the one version of Federici's sculpture is a part of the Federici Studio collection at Passaic County Community College, and that's the piece that you see right here on the right. This starting lineup double classics Major League Baseball figurine set features both Larry Doby and Jackie Robinson. These two players famously broke the color barrier in professional baseball just months apart in 1947. This set, which was issued in 1997, celebrated and commemorated the 50th anniversary of that auspicious moment. Part of the reason we selected this set is to represent Larry Doby is because, to our knowledge, it is one of the few times that the achievements of these two greats are celebrated together on equal footing. So often we see, Jackie Robinson getting all of the credit and Larry Doby kind of being listed as second or a footnote or kind of mentioned at the end. And so it's very nice to see them both being represented here equally together, especially as they both went through much of the same struggle. As I said, only entering professional baseball months apart. Jackie Robinson started in April and Larry Doby starts in July of 1947. In their lifetime, Larry Doby met and played with and against Jackie Robinson on many occasions. They were both in the 1949 All-Star Game, and Doby spoke of Mr. Robinson with great respect when he recalled the difficulty of those early years within their career.
And number 100, well, it may be the last on our list here. It's actually normally the first artifact you see as you come into the museum. This is engine 299. It was built for the construction on the Panama Canal, and it's the last of 100 of that order that were built by the American Locomotive Company at the Cook Works on Madison and Getty Avenue. It's long since removed from this area. Actually, this piece here arrived 3 years before the Paterson Museum. When they were restoring the Rogers building, there was a big search. Again, without the internet, I don't know how they found these things, but community development was on it, and they located 299. They were trying to find a Rogers engine, but there were none to be available. 1979 is also around the same time they were getting prepared to give the Canal Zone back. And this engine was used at the Canal Zone, not only for the initial carving out of the canal, but it would be used for freight. And then later it would be used to celebrate the first transcontinental railroad. In 1855 was the completion of the Panamanian Railroad. That railroad stretch is only a little over 44 miles, but very arduous, going through the jungles and not realizing how disease was spread in those early days, especially with the mosquito. Over 8,000 men had perished. So it's also a tribute to, our willpower to get something done. So after they had taken, most of them were scrapped. There's only three left. One's in Shreveport, Louisiana, another one in Arkansas, and the last one, which was at Balboa Station, again, commemorating the 100th anniversary of the completion. When we think the Transcontinental Railroad, we always consider the 1869 feat, which a Paterson engine was also in that during the 1869 Golden Spike ceremony. This one, though, does legitimatately connect two engines ahead of us. You can see this is when it was returning to New York. Initially, the it was loaded onto a barge and it landed in New Orleans. It traveled by oversized flatbed for part of the way. It could not go on our rails because the standard gauge in the United States is 4 feet 8.5 inches. That's the distance between the rails, and 299 is 5 feet gauge. We have it currently outside with the U.S. on the tender. Initially, it would have had ICC for the Isthmian Canal Commission. When the Army Corps of Engineers took over the project, they stuck the U.S. 299 was always its designation numerically, and they would use these oversized letters or numbers rather, because it was all site driven. There were no, walkie-talkies to figure out where an engine was or what it was doing. So by binoculars and sight alone, so the numbers were kept oversized. Now, our former mayor, Pat Kramer, who recently passed, and a great loss to all of us, but the memories he's left and the witticisms will remain with us forever. And one of the titles he enjoyed most, he loved being mayor, but he loved being called the Great Train Robber. As I mentioned, this was during the time when they were getting ready to take the canal zone over. And I guess technically it was on our property. And we were looking for a locomotive, and they identified 299. It's ours. They used the Hercules, which was the largest floating crane, to lift her and put her on a barge, and they reported that it was going to go out of one of the canal gates. They announced the gate. It was not the one that where they actually did. So by the time the Panamanian government figured it out, they wanted their engine back. And the State Department, I even got involved in, like, you have to give this back. But the charm of Pat Kramer definitely was utilized to its fullest capacity, and we were able to acquire this locomotive and this important piece of Paterson history. Again, of the three big industries, silk, Wright's aeronautical, locomotive industry was 90 years. And again, our products that are built here always go throughout the world, and we never had enough. And this also goes back to 1927, 28, when Robert, I'm drawing a blank, what his last name is. Oh my God, one of our longest trustees. It'll come to me in a minute. He was from the newspapers, and it's not Haynes anyway. I'm drawing a blank. Sorry. I do discuss him in my Paterson history one. He thought, anyway, the Paterson Museum should have the submarine, it should have a loom, and it should have a locomotive and an airplane engine. And in our original museum, which totaled about 1,600 square feet of exhibition, 1,000 square feet on the first floor was for the general history, which housed the boat number one of John Holland. And the second floor, again, where we got our title, the Rock Museum, was just a little over 600 square feet. So none of these products that Pato was really known for would ever fit. And it wasn't until 1982, when we relocated here at the Rogers Building, that we finally were able to fulfill Robert Williams. Oh, yeah, I was trying to think. Sandy Williams. Robert Williams. He was one of our longtime trustees. Again, owner of the Morning Call. Next slide. Also, we used 299, happened to be at the 150th anniversary on May 10th. It was in 2019 for the commemoration of the Golden Spike ceremony. And we did our own driving of Golden Spike. Again, on the right, we had Pat Kramer, the great train robber there, our mayor, and superintendent of the national park, Darren Bach, as they each took a shot at driving the Golden Spike. And that Golden Spike is still there, by the way. This was also, I have to say, the coming out party for the Paterson Museum Foundation, which is our nonprofit entity that helps raise money and spends it on our behalf, and helps us get things that we normally can't acquire through through the city. Plus, we are a branch of, we are a statutory agency of the city government, so fundraising is not part of our mission here. But that's how we were able to create the Paterson Museum Foundation to for this endeavor. And one of the largest projects they've been working on is to create a canopy to protect the two locomotives. We have the smaller one from 1910, also a Cook Alco engine. What you see here is hopefully the future of the preservation plan for the engines. The biggest problem we have isn't the rain and the snow, although there's a lot of snow out there right now, as you all know. But the biggest problem that they face for their conservation is that they heat up all day, whether it's the summer or the winter in the sun. And with the black surface, it's hot to the touch. At night, as it cools off, condensation forms, and that's what promotes rust from the inside out. Sort of, I always think like the old Pintos. To alleviate this, we had the experts from Steamtown, another national site that cares for locomotives, and they said the number one thing you got to do is get a canopy over it. And the first thing that the Paterson Museum Foundation adopted was a plan to save. The first thing you see, and the beginnings of the heritage plan that helped raise the money to save the buildings with the Great Falls Development Corporation in the early days, when the city and the private nonprofit worked hand in hand and established the historic district that would later become a national park. The piece that you're looking at here pretty much is the mock-up we're looking at, and I think the total bill is about 750,000. It is pricey. Unfortunately, we lost time. As I mentioned, you notice that year 2019 is when the Paterson Museum Foundation started, and then in 2020 the world stopped, and then we've been trying to, like everything else in this world, recover from that 3-year period that we lost. So hopefully you'll see this done in the next couple of years.
Yeah, and I think it'll be a very great space to curate as well. Everyone's going to enjoy it.
It'll protect and we'll have an outdoor venue too for
Good.
field trips and classes.
Well, thank you all for joining us for this installment. I think we'll just really quickly check and see if we have any questions. If we don't have any questions, which as of right now we don't, I just want to let everybody know again that this video is going to go up hopefully by the end of the week onto our YouTube channel, and then I will send out an email so everyone will know what the link is. Please feel free to share that and tell people about it who missed our live presentation. And if you haven't already, you can always subscribe to our YouTube channel, which will give you those notifications directly as well. We're currently working on some other projects, but we haven't got anything finalized yet, so we're not going to tease you with what they might be. You will receive email announcements when we are all set. We have some good, I think, good stuff planned, but we don't have anything together. We've been focusing very hard on these exhibits, this exhibit presentation. So thank you very much for joining us this afternoon, and Happy New Year. I don't think I said that yet. This is our first webinar since 2026. So